the argument that this is a Christian nation based on Christian principles founded by Christian people, which makes me Christian sick to my stomach, it's a lie. You know, the Ten Commandments aren't the basis for law. There's only 2 of them that are actual federal laws, and a third one which has been partially a state law in some cases with adultery,
right.
Which is no longer in the books for the most part. But that verse says that essentially if you're a true Christian, you're not going to oppose the government. And this nation was founded by a bunch of people who were opposing the government. They were, hey, King George, screw you.
This is about subjection to governments because they're in place by God.
What version are you reading?
Oh, wonderful.
I'm pulling it from the New American Standard.
Ooh, cool. I'll read mine in NIV and we'll see where they go.
Okay, mine says, this is the very beginning of the chapter, so it starts out saying, every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. And of course, he's talking about the government here.
Yeah.
For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake.
Yep.
Now, this is one that Dr. Dino needs to hear, the next verse. Therefore, for because of this, you also pay taxes.
Yeah.
For rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing.
So
render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. And that's where it switches over then to just sort of, love each other and goes into sort of Christian to Christian.
Well, that's very relevant to today's topic. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Those are the verses that Don was actually asking for when he was talking about,
thank you very much.
Submitting to leadership.
This verse means also that Saddam Hussein is put in place by God.
Yeah.
And it means that the Palestinian, rulers are in place by God. And it means that, Adolf Hitler was put in place by
Which
God.
sets up an
and
incredibly troubling contradiction.
That it was wrong to oppose him because he was there for what was good. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Makes your head implode, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's like we have to go fight for good against this guy that's there for good because God put him there for good. But we need to do good and take him out.
But see, the thing you're missing,
ridiculous.
Tracy, is that King James, when he redid the Bible and wrote it, he was talking about America, not the Middle East.
Yeah, it's all about
that's a
America.
different God and a different, set of rules. But.
Yeah, I mean, basically that verse is saying God put into effect every piece of government around the world. It's all there. It's God's authority, and you just have to accept it.
Yeah, and oddly enough, that wouldn't have been a contradiction, or so much of a contradiction at the time it was written, because the world to those people was a little tiny area.
Yeah.
And now it's huge.
Well, I mean, that was why
smaller.
for so long, especially in the Middle Ages, they believed that, the king was put in place by God.
Sure.
He was, right up there with the church rulers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, just to add, this, I think I've brought this up once before. I don't know if I've ever brought it up on the show, but like that story about the stone soup, that's
right.
what it reminds me of. When Christians say, God does stuff, but he does it through us. Well, that's the same as the story of the stone soup, where the guy goes into the town, he cons everybody into making this big pot of soup so that he can have something to eat by telling me he has a magic rock. He puts it in the bowl. He tells them, you got to boil up the rock and we'll get this great soup. And then he starts saying, I had this once before and we added carrots. It was really good. And by the time he's done, they've added carrots and ham and broccoli. And it's like everything's in the soup, and they make this giant pot of soup. The whole town eats. Everybody's happy. And wow, his magic rock was great.
That's an awesome magic rock.
It's like, you don't need the rock if you're going to put everything in there and make your own soup.
Right.
And that's the whole thing. It's like, if God helps those who help themselves, to me, that's like the most blatant statement of atheism you could make. Because you're saying, I need to do it because God's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, why bother with this God thing? Why not just go do it?
Yeah, if you're doing it anyway.
It's the same thing when we talk about the Euthyphro dilemma when we're talking about morality. Is something moral because God says so, or does God say so because it's moral.
Right.
If it's the latter, what do we need God for? We don't need an intermediary to tell us what's right and wrong.
But actually, I mean, I think the main argument is that God actually does just make the morality.
Yes.
Because whatever God says to do, the Christian will say that is right.
That's the direct response that I got from a number of Christians recently, is that the solution to the Euthyphro dilemma is that, yes, whatever God says is true, and if God says tomorrow that murder is morally correct, then
Right.
that would be so, and we just wouldn't even think about it or question it, because God would change our fundamental way of viewing things so that we would understand that murder was right. and this, as soon as they said it, I was like, well, there goes free will.
Yeah. I mean, it's whatever God says.
My entire existence is now at the whim
Yeah.
of your bearded guy in the sky.
And also, God is not in subjection to the morality that he dictates, because
Sure.
morality is different for God than it is for people.
Yeah.
That's the other argument you'll get.
You know, he's God.
I say
Get
not
some
as I
slack.
do.
Right.
Do as
He can murder, he can rape, he can do anything, but it's like, if you don't do it because it's wrong.
But that makes no sense if you're going to also say that God is the essence of good. Right?
But they're saying he's good in like a higher spiritual way that we can't understand.
Right.
He has a different morality because he's a whole different being.
We've heard all that before.
Like cat
It's
morality
nonsense.
wouldn't be the same as human morality.
You know, if it doesn't make sense to us, then how can they say it's good?
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah. All
We're
right.
gonna let you go. Thanks for calling.
Sure. Bye.
And as a clarification, for those of you who are foaming at the mouth right now, we're not saying that our religious people are crazy,
No,
but
not
most
at
of
all.
you probably are.